My name is Ashley Green, and this is my 321 assignment for the video that we watched entitled For the Life of the World. So in the video that we watched, there were a lot of things that I had heard for the first time, some of the things that I had heard before but that were reinforced. And whenever I was listening to it, there were three things that really stuck out to me that I had never heard or never really thought about in the way that I should have before. And one of those things was whenever in the video they read the scripture Jeremiah 29:7. And that scripture says, "Also seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, because if it prospers, you too will prosper." I've read that verse several times, but I've never really thought about it in the way that they presented it in the video. In the video, he explained that this was what Jeremiah was telling to the exiles. They were telling them that while you're in exile, you can still pray for your city. You're in a place, you're in a strange place, and you've never been here before. But while you're here, it is your job to make sure that the city prospers. It is your job to pray for the city and make sure that it is brought up. And that's exactly what our job is too. We may be strangers in a strange place. Heaven is essentially our home. But while we're here on earth, our job is to make sure that our city, our dwelling, wherever we may be placed, it is our job to make sure that it prospers. Maybe that's through prayer. Maybe that is through talking to loved ones about Christ. Maybe inviting people to church. Maybe it's helping in our community, doing outreaches, or just praying that God would do something. We're not supposed to be part of the problem. We're supposed to be part of the solution by making sure that our city prospers. Not condemning other people, not putting people down or saying this is how you should do it, but simply showing God's love and praying that God's will would be done in these people's lives. So that was the first thing that I noticed. The second new concept that I learned was the idea of oikonomia and economy. The video explained that oikonomia is about God's calling and His plan for each and every one of our lives. And economy is more of what our specific calling is to do. And he equated that with the sound of an instrument, how every instrument has its own economy. Every instrument is played differently, just like every person is different. Every person has their own unique gift and calling that God has given us. But when we play them together, that's what the oikonomia is. That is whenever we all work together, we can build up and we can do what God has all called us to do together. We can bring about His will and His plan, His oikonomia. The third thing that I learned goes along with the idea of oikonomia and economy, and that is simply that God has given us all gifts, and our job is to be gift givers. God has given us gifts, and God has given us callings, and it is our job to use those gifts to help other people, to make our city prosper. All three of these things, they work together. And our job as we learn and we develop these gifts and we identify our callings is that we wouldn't just work on our own and say, well, God's given me this, and so this is what I'm going to do. But that we can say, okay, God, you've given me this gift. Now, what would you like me to do with it? How can I join this with you? And as we use our gifts for God and as we allow God to work in and through us, that is how we make all of these things work together. So all of these things work together. Learning to make sure that our city prospers, learning to abide by God's oikonomia, and learning to find our calling and be gift givers and have our gifts work in accordance with God. All three of these things work together. When we do one, it helps us to do the other. And when we all do them together, we can be that life to the world. We can be that light, and we can draw our city to God. We can help make our city prosper by finding the gifts and the callings that God has placed in us and working alongside Him to make it happen, and by praying for our city. There were also two things that I've noticed before but hadn't really thought about. Whenever I saw this video, I liked the different terms that they used for things that I had thought about before but not necessarily in the regards that they mentioned it. They talked about how there are three different ways that Christians respond to the world, and that is through fortification, domination, or accommodation. I've never heard it put in those terms before, but I've seen it in action. Fortification, we ignore everything that's in the world. We say, okay, well, we're called to be in the world but not of the world, and we take that into extremes, and we say, okay, we can't even be affected by the world, we can't even be in association with the world, we have to be our own separate entity. And that's not what God has called us to do at all. He's called us to be in the world and to make a difference. But fortification is basically hiding from the world and saying, I'm going to do it my way, I'm going to stay this way, I can't be corrupted, and so I don't want to be in the world, or else I'll become of it. And that's kind of, you're shielding yourself from being a part of the world. So if you're all on your own, how can you be effective in the world if you're trying to hide yourself from it? The other one was domination. And this is the idea of fighting. This is the idea of coming in and saying, okay, well, we're Christians, we do it the right way. And in a certain respect, it's like imposing your thoughts and your beliefs upon the people around you, saying, well, we're Christians, so we have it the right way, we know how to do it, and trying to impose those thoughts and those beliefs on other people and trying to make them like us, which is not what God has called us to do at all. And the third one is accommodation, and that is when we engage into the activities of the world. And again, God has not called us to engage into those activities. We're supposed to be in it, but we're also supposed to be separate. So accommodation is basically saying, okay, well, it's socially acceptable to smoke, or it's socially acceptable to drink, or it's socially acceptable to do drugs, or to do this, or to do that. And so it's okay for us to do it too, but that's not what God has called us to do. So basically these three things show us ways that sometimes Christians handle being in the world but not of the world, and it's a misuse of it. We're supposed to be in the world, so we're supposed to be ministering to others, not imposing our beliefs, not hiding ourselves, and not trying to be like the world, but simply causing them to see Christ in us, and through that they would want to develop and become better. The second thing that I knew but was reinforced through this video is the idea that our original plan was priesthood. God designed us in everything that He built us and everything that He created us to do. He created us in worship. Everything that we do, everything that we are, everything that we have is supposed to be in response to Him. It's supposed to be an act of worship. How we go about our lives, how we live, how we talk, how we are with other people. It's a response to God. It is our worship to Him. That's what He created us for, was to worship Him and to bring others towards Him. And that was God's original plan for us. When the fall came, we lost that ability. But when God sent His Son to die for us, we regained that ability to be saved and to be sanctified and renewed. And so that idea of priesthood came back, and we are able to live our lives in worship to God, not on our own, but with God's help and with God's strength. The question that I chose to answer was about the Chinese lanterns and how the Chinese lanterns are a good metaphor for our life and our gifts and our callings back to God. And basically, Chinese lanterns, they were made from ordinary materials. It wasn't anything special. It was from paper, plastic, dirt. And that's exactly how we were. We were just ordinary. God picked us up from the dust of the ground, and He chose to breathe life into us. He made something ordinary into something special, which is exactly how the Chinese lanterns were developed. Whenever the Chinese lanterns are constructed, they are designed with the job of being let go and going up into the heavens and being a light for all who see them. Their job is to offer a light into the city. And this is a gift that points towards heaven. And that's exactly what we are. When God designed us, He designed us as a light to our homes, a light to our neighbors, a light to the community and to the people that are around us. And our job, we were made for the heavens. We are designed to lift everything up to God and to point, our whole lives are to point to heaven and are to point to God and who He is and all that He's done. Our gifts are to be used to point everything to God, to point everything to heaven. Our job is to be let go, to be brought up, and to show others who God is and all that He is and all that He can do. And everything that we are is just a humble offering to point everything back to God.